some hen of the woods. Just thought I'd let y'all tune in, teach some fun things, discuss some of the upcoming endeavors, and show y'all what I do with this mushroom. I'm not going to put it all in my bag. Hello and welcome, friends of the forest. Hope it's going well. I've been out collecting lots of mushrooms today. It's been an abundant day. So one of my favorites, the pom-pom or the lion's mane, very medicinal mushroom, really beautiful. And lots of other mushrooms, whole bag full of them, including this beautiful hen of the woods, which I found right here. Woo! So sometimes when you grab the hen of the woods, the whole thing basically comes up, and the only reason I was that way in this case is because there's a whole big one right there and another one next to it. So you really want to be mindful of how much you're harvesting. You know, despite what some people will say, it doesn't matter, but I think it matters because it's not just you out here foraging, it's a lot of other animals and it's a lot of other people. So what I do is basically cut off the top fronds, the things that aren't full of dirt, and I'll leave this butt in the ground like that, so regrow it. Welcome, welcome foragers. Welcome to another dimension where we're foraging. So here's all the wonderful edible aspects of this really fresh hen of the woods. Of course, I checked it out first to make sure there's not a lot of rot, or actually another important thing to do is checking out the underside and making sure that the underside is not all full of large pore surface. You can see this one's getting there. It's hard because it's white. You can see kind of the pores are getting bigger on this one, so this is an older version, and the pores are still really small on this hen of the woods, so they're much better when the pores are smaller. You can always make it into a soup stock. Of course, it's an immunomodulator and very important medicinal mushroom, so you can definitely still make a stew or anything out of it, and it'll eventually tenderize if you cook it. So this part is like the stem butt, and I'm going to replant that. You can see this aspect here. Put that right into the ground. There's a huge hen here as well. It's pretty amazing. Let's see how fresh this one is. I can already tell this one's a little older, but actually still really fresh. Fresh enough to forage. So if I didn't have already a load of these in my fridge, or in various people's fridges, I should say, then I would probably go after that one too. But my foraging bag is getting pretty full, and I'm gonna have to have some wonderful potlucks with some good friends. So I like to just chop these thin and saute them in whatever oil you prefer, of course. The cleaner the better. So I often use coconut oil. Ghee is also good, depending on where the cows are. Coconut oil is good depending on where the coconuts are. So it's a very difficult question where your oil comes from. But you saute them pretty hard, a little high heat, and stir them around. Get them really cooked down, and they become really delicious. And then you can add whatever vegetables to that, or eggs, and make yourself an awesome mushroom stir fry. I really like some tamari soy sauce as well, and it really is very medicinal for the immune system. I love them too. Caitlin, welcome to the foraging fun. So hoping to do live feeds more often and just talk to y'all and get some communication going. Hello, Aradia Incantrix. I've always wondered how to say your name. I see you on Facebook and I never knew how to say your name, but it's obviously a magical name. Hey Caitlin, I'll probably just saute these up. Basically I only make soup of anything that's kind of gets a little old. So as I was mentioning, sometimes the pores on the underside of the mushrooms get old. Those I would make soup from, but these are super fresh. I'll end up sauteing them. You can always dry them as well. So now let's checking this one out. Yummy magical hen of the woods. So it's always recommended to cook mushrooms, not eat them raw. It's because they contain something called chitin, which is actually really indigestible. So your body really can't break down mushrooms that are raw, despite what you kind of hear in the raw food circuit or wherever you hear that. Mushrooms need to be cooked, even the medicinal mushrooms, especially those medicinal mushrooms that are hard, polypores, that's all full of chitin. Chitin is what shellfish have on them. So you can't really digest all the medicinal aspects. So in this case, when the mushroom is cooked down, it makes it easier to digest the mushrooms. Nice find. My bag is getting pretty full. The service is pretty bad, but we'll see if we can walk around a bit, and I'll show you all some other mushrooms. Here's a small hen. I'm not gonna take that babe because I have a whole bunch. And you know, interestingly enough, last time I webcasted, somebody asked me about finding active psychotropic mushrooms in the ecosystem, and I told them, you know, it's not that hard to find. Every once in a while you'll come across them. Interesting thing is I harvested some pawpaws, and I really feel strongly about reseeding every pawpaw that I harvest. So one of the things I do when I come out to these locations is I'll actually replant all the seeds. I'll keep them dry. It's kind of a big pain in the butt because as soon as pawpaws dry out, they're no longer viable. So what I'll do is I'll take all the pawpaw seeds and I'll actually reseed them all over the places that I forage. And so I was doing that and really offering all these pawpaws seeds into the earth and trying to proliferate them in the right environment and really caretake this beautiful fat and carbohydrate source. And as soon as I put the last seeds in the ground, I looked to the side and I saw a whole bunch of gymnopolis, which are these orange mushrooms, and they indeed are active. If you don't know what active means, you can look that up. But it's pretty profound how, you know, the more you interact with the ecosystem and the more you forage to try to serve the ecosystem, caretaking, you know, the ecosystem really rewards us. So it's trying to serve us, and the more we try to serve the ecosystem, the more that feedback loop seems to be developed. It's really profound, and it's something that definitely changes your life. And unfortunately, those who, you know, eat a consumer-based diet and don't go get their own foods, or, you know, don't farm for their food, they don't get that direct revelation that the ecosystem is alive, that there is an interaction, that it does seem like through the power of coincidence, magical things happen, you know. Definitely planting pawpaw seeds for the next generation. So here's another bit of mushrooms. These are not edible. What I used to know these as, their genus has changed. Sometimes they're called little brown mushrooms, right? So I can't think of the old genus, but they have a new genus now, and there are mycena here. A lot of mushrooms around down trees. So you can see there's actually one reishi here. This is a kind of Ganoderma here, but you know, just one, and I've already harvested so many of the year. There's another there. Let's see, the underside. White underside, probably artist conch. So I've harvested so many rishis this year that, you know, I don't need them, and I would only pick, you know, one or two off of an area like that. Is hen of the woods the same as chicken of the woods? No. This is something that people have been asking. You know, to make it as complicated as possible, which is usually what I do, See, there are some similarities and there are some differences, and we have to talk like that. So no mushroom or plant is the same, right? But there are parallels, and so they are both mushrooms. That's the same. They both have names that sound like animals. That's the same. They both kind of grow in the fall. That's the same. Other than that, if you look at their taxonomy, their Latin names, they're totally different. And they have different growth habits. They have different trees that they like. But they have some general comparisons. So if you look at like oak forest, tulip poplars, maples, things like that, you'll find some hen of the woods and chicken of the woods. I find that chickens come out a little earlier. Like, it's basically the chicken of the woods season is already over. If anybody's not familiar with chicken of the woods, I have a blog on my website at returntonature.us, which shows you how to identify chicken of the woods. Hen of the woods grow at the base of trees, where you're never, really rarely, I find them. You're going to find chicken of the woods growing up trees, but sometimes at the base of trees. So that's some of the identifying characteristics, is habitat, but then you're also talking about what do they look like and all that. So hen of the woods is brown with a white underside. Chicken of the woods is bright orange, kind of a sunburst color, many kind of radiating orange-yellow patterns, and the underside can be either yellow or white. So, those are some of the breakdowns of the differences and the similarities. So it's like such an important thing that we can get a language with this practice where we're going beyond some of our conventional understanding. Is a pear and an apple the same? Well, there are parts that are the same. It's in the same family, right? But there are differences. So always that's the case. Hi, welcome friends on the chat. Here's another fun mushroom. This is a hard one to discern. So you either get Cortinaris or you get bluets. And so this is actually a bluet. They have kind of a sweet flavor. It's always good to smell mushrooms. You can't be hurt by mushrooms, despite the kind of propaganda that people tell you. You can touch any poisonous mushrooms on the planet. You can, smell them. You're not going to get any problems from that. The difference is that when you eat them, right? So don't eat mushrooms you can't properly identify. You would think that would be sane and normal, but it's actually how people get poisoned by mushrooms. There's no other way to get poisoned by mushrooms. So anyone who has been poisoned by mushrooms has eaten mushrooms that they didn't properly identify. So here's a bluet. They're somewhat common, but they're hard to find in abundance. So I usually don't pick them because I found about 2 or 3 today. And, if I wanted to, I can add them to a kind of mushroom stir fry. But I'm already going to be trying some brick tops, which I haven't really eaten. So those are mushrooms which are, I've known about for 10, 12 years now, and I never really picked them to eat. So that gives my exploration of the next couple days, So one at a time, I'm a big fan of eat one mushroom in a small amount, So I know this mushroom day in and day out. I've studied it for years, and now I'm going to eat it for the first time. And I'll eat like I'll saute them up, always smell it, make sure that it appeals to your senses. I should say that this is after having properly identified the mushroom, which means you've wrestled with the Latin, you understand mycological families, you've gotten proper identification. Then you saute it up and make sure that your senses are really desirous, that the flavor, the smell is really turning on your digestive system. That's really important. And then I'll eat kind of a small amount just to sit with it, because it's so true that depending on whatever you've had in the last 48 hours, you might have an allergic reaction. You might be allergic to one thing that no one else is. So, and it's also a matter of respect, it's also a matter of really harmonizing with a new species, a new being, just like if you meet a person, take that sensorial experience with them gradually. Don't get married to them blindly as soon as you meet them in Las Vegas. It's probably not going to work out. So the same thing is true with any plants or mushrooms. You could always eat more later, so be careful out there. Tia asks a question. She says, red mushroom with a yellow stem growing in her yard. Are they poisonous or can you eat them? She lives in South Carolina. So, you know, unfortunately, you're talking about now probably 10,000 mushrooms. So a lot of people want me to identify their mushrooms. And, you know, there's something beautiful in getting yourself a field guide and really working your knowledge base up, because, you know, the goal here is not to eat a mushroom one time. The goal here is to be able to recognize your environment. So it's going to take a lot of work to do that. By that description, I have no idea what kind of mushroom you have, but if you post it on the Return to Nature page and I see it, you know, it's like a picture's worth 1,000 words. Really becomes true when you're talking about plant and mushroom identification. So, you know, there are many red-capped mushrooms with yellow stems. They could be in the bolete family, so that's where I would recommend look, you know, type in bolete family mushrooms and start looking through them and try to get an understanding of the genus and species that you could find in your area. Join mushroom identification forums, you know, spend time cataloging and looking at mushrooms. You know, I spent years looking through the Audubon Field Guide. Gary Linkoff wrote the Audubon Field Guide of the Eastern region. And I spent years, you know, 18, 19, 20, just flipping through the pictures and just looking at them and getting them all cataloged into my brain. And then you go out in the forest and eventually you'll start seeing them and, oh wait, what page is that on? So you start to kind of develop your catalog within, you know, that's the important thing. So Aradia, you got to tell me how to pronounce your name. That's how she was with coral. I waited quite a while before eating more than a little. Yeah, definitely. Coral mushrooms, you know, some colors, for example, are poisonous and some colors are not. So it's a real big field of be very careful out there. You know, it's not something to treat like a grocery store. You know, you're not in a grocery store. These mushrooms can kill you. There are a lot of deadly poisonous mushrooms which are unforgiving towards your learning process. So that means we have to supplement our learning process. We can't expect nature, no matter how compassionate nature is, we cannot expect nature to change for us individually. So, you know, if a mushroom's poisonous for one person, it's generally going to be poisonous for everyone, unless, of course, you are superhuman or bionic. So it's really a humbling and gradual and careful process. And, you know, you never want to, you never want to eat a mushroom that you just find. You know, there's another one. Marcus just posted the mushroomobserver.org website. It's a great one. You know, spend a lot of time there just studying them. You want to discern between eating wild mushrooms versus observing and learning about wild mushrooms. There's a big difference. So you can do mushroom identification all day, all night, and really there's no problem until you try to eat one. So any species that you're going to try to eat, even if you think it's edible, make sure you can find it 4, 5, 6 times and properly identify it before you eat it. What this also helps you to do is get familiar with their frequency in the habitat. So not just, taking whatever you find. It's very important to understand habitat and what the ecosystem can handle when you take from it, you know. Because we have to kind of birth ourselves out of this exploitive model that we're in, where we go into nature, just like we go into the grocery store and we say, give me, gimme, gimme, gimme. If we do that in the fragile ecosystem that we actually have remaining, we're just going to destroy it, you know. Some of you maybe have seen, I wrote a pretty fun essay on Christopher Columbus and basically the conquistadors and how we came, you know, Europeans came to the United States and they took something that was already not working in Europe and they recreated that same paradigm. So basically they brought all the seeds, they brought everything that they knew, and they only knew how to get overpopulated and exploit the ecosystem. As a result, here we are in overpopulation and exploited ecosystem. We have carbon levels rising, we don't have enough soil being built. you know, and so what we need to do when we go into the ecosystem is try to learn the ecosystem and try to learn what it can handle. Not just figure out what's food and what you can eat, you know, what can you give back to the ecosystem, how can you serve the ecosystem. And that's another thing, you know, so many of you know that I'm currently fundraising for a van so that I can tour around and visit you all and basically be on perpetual tour and teach and webcast just like this and be in different locations and really share this message. And one of the things that I constantly do, as I was mentioning in the intro to this, is I constantly try to caretake the ecosystem, and I replant things, and most of that which I harvest for food is actually known as invasive plants. So you know, I have some issues with using that kind of terminology, but really trying to become a modern caretaker for the ecosystem. So just know that if you do donate to the the GoFundMe campaign, that you're donating towards me having the resources and the tools and the capacity to practice caretaking the ecosystems that I forage in and teach you all about that at the same time. So I hope that you can you know, really consider even donating $11, right? If everybody donates $11, then I can definitely get a van, take this work to the next level. So coral can be dangerous. Yeah, coral mushrooms can be pretty funky. So if anybody has any questions, of course, you can always be in touch. You could always write me an email at dan@returntonature.us. My website is also returntonature.us. You can visit on Instagram at Return to Nature, and check out my GoFundMe project. There I explain a lot, as well as on my website. So thanks for tuning in all. I'll be back soon. Many blessings and peace.